So today we're going to talk about a controversial topic, and that is goobers. Now, I'm not only going to talk about the things that you find in your nose or call a whole bunch of baddies goobers, because they are indeed goobers, but we're going to be talking about this thing. Yes, that's right. And the reason I'm not saying it out loud is because if I do, then the YouTube algorithms have a tendency to throw my channel into the sun, which they already do on a regular basis, so it doesn't really matter. This word has been thrown around a lot lately. Mostly by right to far-right conservatives looking to disparage LGBTQ plus members, either teachers or doctors or anything really, it doesn't matter. As long as it happens to be just a little bit queer, then it is fair game. Now, massive corporations like Twitter and Reddit are starting to say that you can't use that as an insult anymore. You can't call someone you don't like simply because they happen to be LGBTQ plus a goober simply because it gives you some kind of feeling. The warm, wonderful feeling of telling people I don't know that they happen to be the worst thing in the world. You might be wondering why Tim Pool had to do this, which again seems like he's got a lawyer that's looking to fleece him for every penny.
Did you or a loved one lose income opportunities in the present, in a potential past, or a possible future?
But at least your super chats are being spent correctly. In fact, you may see a lot of the right starting to use this rhetoric on a regular basis as well. What about the quartering?
Nervous about this narrative about well, we need to show strong, powerful trans people to our kids. We need to give them this message at a time in their life in which they are confused already. If it is worshipped in a way in the show, it may have people choose a path that has insanely high suicide rates.
You know, everyone's favorite homophobic, transphobic racist who likes to hide behind the fact that he's not possibly homophobic or racist because he has a number of gay black fathers. However, he will be the first to tell you the following.
Pretending that these are normal things, the left losing their mind over a particular word that most people are using to describe it. No. Why? Why do you need that validation from third graders? If you don't want me to call you what it seems like you are, maybe stop acting like that.
Which is unusual for him because he also likes to scream the word at the top of his lungs. If you're wondering why exactly he's doing this, why does he do anything really? It's mostly because of Disney. You see, Jack Pacific, everyone's favorite alt-right, light bright, I don't know, whatever you want to call him, racist, white nationalist dude. Yeah, Jack Pacific took to the Twitters to announce that apparently Disney is a goober corporation, and he just kept saying the word over and over in all caps because normal. Now, Disney is coming under fire not from the normal suspects, leftists who say that it's kind of fucked up that a single corporation amasses all this power and then becomes this massive conglomerate that's going to eat and devour every other single piece of media in the world until they're the only ones providing you with entertainment, not to mention extending the copyright on Mickey Mouse
to such a degree that it actually extends copyright law in general, because
Disney has been funding, up until very recently, very far-right conservative politicians who actually enact laws that affect LGBTQ plus people, like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida by Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis started to go to war with Disney because Disney came out and they said, well, you know what, this has been kind of bad for our public image. We probably shouldn't have been funding all these politicians. So a super horrifyingly bad company like Disney came around and said, well, you know what, we've been trying to have a bit more of a progressive image lately. We like to say that we're inclusive. After all, look at this nice picture. You see the picture? Look at the picture. Are you staring at the picture? The picture's nice, isn't it? So now you think we're nice. And when that doesn't work, Disney goes ahead and says, well, you know what? We're going to really start trying now. We're going to stop funding all these terrible far-right politicians, and instead we're going to work on inclusivity. And by inclusivity, we mean
characters appearing as Easter eggs so they can easily be edited out of foreign markets that otherwise wouldn't let us make money, rather than take a stand. And if you're upset at that, or the fact that we directly fund politicians that pass anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation, well, don't worry, we're going to retroactively suggest some of your favorite villains were gay as well.
Like we got the lesbian kiss in Lightyear, which also very easy to edit out in other markets. But people like Ben Shapiro suddenly are coming out and saying that Disney is indoctrinating children with sexuality. Why? Why, Disney? Why in the world do you have to talk about sex or even express any kind of sexuality towards children? Why would you do such a thing?
Hi, I'm Lane. And I'm Tian Po.
Hello, Tian Po. And I am Yao, king of the rock. And there's nothing you girls can do about it. Ow!
Oh, hi, Bo. Hi.
I wanted to thank you, Woody, for saving my flock.
Oh, hey, it was, nothing.
What do you say I get someone else to watch the sheep tonight?
Hell yeah.
Hey, cutie! Wanna pollinate with a real bug?
Foot size doesn't matter.
Oh, it's that lettuce hit the bottom! Well, where did they all come from?
The whole Pongo, you old rascal.
That Oedipus thing? Man, I thought I had problems.
So Disney has a very long history of talking about heterosexual relationships and showing them as normal. After all, it's usually the centerpiece of most of their stories. They are love stories, after all, which makes sense because Ben doesn't want to have to explain things to his children, such as, Daddy, why are you making us watch this cartoon instead of complaining about why pussies have to be dried? I'm gonna have to edit a lot of this out. And that brings us to one of the biggest proponents of the goober phenomenon as of late, which would be the Libs of TikTok account. Now, Libs of TikTok is an account on Twitter that amassed a very large following by showing a variety of things. One of those things happened to be what they call liberal cringe. Now, don't get me wrong, I have absolutely no problem with cringe compilations.
States of America, Donald.
If you want to make 10,000 videos with some blue-haired woman screaming at the top of her lungs because Donald Trump got elected, seriously, there's not one other woman who's... That's totally fine. That's cool. Make all the cringe compilations you want. The problem I have is when you take things that don't happen to be soliciting inappropriate relationships with children and label them as such as this example here, where we've got Pete Buttigieg's husband giving the Pledge of Allegiance to the rainbow flag.
One camp, full of pride, indivisible, with affirmation and equal rights for all. Watch your heads.
Now, if you want to say this is cringe, that's up to you. You have a complete right to do so. If you want to label this as what you have, that in my mind is adding a narrative. You are no longer just posting cringe, you are narrating the cringe. You are saying, hey, by the way, this activity, this is wrong. And it's wrong because it's the worst possible thing a human being could be. Now, this account is known for getting stories dramatically wrong, such as not even taking down the fact that this idea that a teacher was trying to convert kids into becoming furries by putting out cat boxes was completely debunked, or this time when they thought that this curriculum was actually a furry curriculum trying to teach them things. Make no mistake about it, the account hates queer people and goes to incredible lengths to track them down, find out where teachers are teaching, if they happen to identify as LGBTQ, label them as pedophiles or groomers, and then afterwards put up their information for everyone to see, including the press secretary of Ron DeSantis.
Over the weekend, Governor DeSantis' press secretary tweeted this: the bill that liberals inaccurately call Don't Say Gay would be more accurately described as anti bill.
In fact, it was promoted by the largest podcast in the world, Joe Rogan's, and then put on the largest news program nationally syndicated in the United States, Tucker Carlson Tonight, multiple times.
Have you noticed, I mean, I know you're not a psychiatrist, or perhaps you are, I don't know who you are, but are you surprised that the people who are the most deeply enmeshed in narcissism, who talk about themselves the most, are also capable of the greatest cruelty?
Now, Higher Right Check, the person who runs Libs of TikTok account, registered her real legal name on her website, so it was actually public information. This information was then used by Taylor Lorenz, a journalist for the Washington Post, to make a story about her, and then they wouldn't have been able to confirm that they had in fact found the Libs of TikTok house had it not been for Glenn Greenwald tweeting out that information and confirming it. So technically, Glenn Greenwald did dox Libs of TikTok before the Washington Post or Taylor Lorenz had an opportunity to do so.
It's the sense of, this is something I'm willing to do only if no one else is watching.
Either way, this account had to delete thousands upon thousands of tweets because it regularly engaged in the activity of falsely accusing LGBTQ+ people as being dangers to children simply because they identified as LGBTQ+. And of course, some people would take this and run with it. That brings us to James Lindsay. Now, if you're unfamiliar with James Lindsay, how can I learn this power? He is considered an intellectual, even though the field of study that he should be a supreme leader in happens to be mathematics. Nonetheless, he likes to claim that he is an incredibly super genius 9,000 IQ, big-brained individual, because he knows a heck of a lot about CRT.
You can look the paper up. It's called Tracking Privilege Preserving Epistemic Pushback in Critical Race and Feminist Philosophy Classrooms.
That's not being taught in K-12 schools. Sorry.
I mean, congratulations.
Now, there's a lot of people who talk about critical race theory who haven't actually read any of the literature. James Lindsay is unique in that he has read the literature and he doesn't understand it. When he actually faces off against someone who actually knows what CRT is about, this is how good it goes.
First of all, your counter is predicated on the idea that there's a one-to-one relationship between critical race theory and critical theory as sort of produced from the Marxist tradition, from the Frankfurt School, etc., when in fact, critical race theory has certainly connections to any kind of critical intellectual discourse, but it's also connected to critical legal studies, which was not committed to sort of inheriting all of the kind of Gramscian and Marxian sort of ideas that you're talking about. And again, even the type of Marxism you're talking about is a very narrow, thin, sort of crude Marxism, or even what we call vulgar Marxism, which alleges a relationship between economic base and cultural superstructure that is one-to-one, when in fact, what most Marxists have argued, and what certainly most Marxists post the mid part of the 20th century have argued, is that it's a much more complicated dynamic than even Gramsci himself argues at in the Prison Notebooks about this idea of hegemony and how it happens along a compromise equilibrium, whereby some people, or whereby on the one hand we absolutely are hostage to the economic conditions around us, but on the other hand, structures and states and institutions also appeal to our own desires and our own interests and our own needs. It's a much more dynamic and complicated relationship than you're talking about. And as far as sort of structures, again, you're making a connection between structures in terms of institutional structures that I was talking about and the particular type of structures that, say, a Saussure would be talking about in terms of structuralism. That's not actually what I was talking about. And that's not what most people are talking about when they talk about systems and structures. Again, that's a very tight correlation you draw. And if we were to accept that correlation, then sure. But it's not only that we're not accepting it, it's actually not what we're talking about. And postmodernism, again, plays upon a range of things. I'm sorry?
I said you know a lot about this, actually.
James Lindsay is also one of the most prolific goober accusers on the internet. He had never met a person he did not want to call that. In fact, he would go as far as calling breakfast cereals that if they happened to have pronouns on the back. And he would do it again and again and again. And while this all seems like fun and games on the internet, it can have real-world consequences. This activity resulted in multiple teachers getting fired, multiple teachers receiving death threats, some people being too afraid to show up at their place of work or their own house, people being doxxed, people being harassed, and it eventually spilled into pride.
What was supposed to be a quiet reading time with drag queen Panda Dulce ended like this.
Did you guys call the cops?
It was stormed by 8 Proud Boys who disrupted the event.
The incident occurred Saturday, and witnesses who wanted to stay anonymous say the group that disrupted the event was acting aggressively and yelling offensive slurs against the LGBTQ+ community.
Once Pride arrived, the entire all LGBTQ+ people happened to be the G word became a really dangerous thing, specifically when it happened to do with Drag Queen Story Hour. For those who don't know, Drag Queen Story Hour is an incredibly wholesome event where typically a man will dress up in a theatrical attire, one to look like a woman, and then in character they will read stories to children, and that's it. But that brings us to Shoe on Head's post. Shoe on Head seems to have very uncomfortable stances when it comes to people in drag, and also seems to buy into the conservative rhetoric that people in drag are naturally going to be sexualized, sexualizing, or being sexual towards children. When you combine these photos, which look very bad upon first appearance, and I will agree that they should have covered up the sign if they were going to host an event for children, with the idea that it looks now that they are doing lap dances for kids, when that never happened. In fact, the logo actually happens to be the same logo that's used in an ice cream store that's located very close by, and no one seemed to really have a problem with that.
Just another weekend in Weimar. On Saturday, a nightclub in Dallas held an event called Drag Your Kids to Pride. At the event, little kids danced with drag queens and tipped them with dollar bills. This is grotesque. Sexualizing children always is. So there were a small number of brave protesters outside. One of them was our friend Alex Stein. He tried to get into the event.
Do you think that there were actual passengers in the planes? And if so, did they perish in the attacks?
I don't know. I don't believe Mohammed Atta was on the plane. Those guys weren't even able to.
I'm talking about the passengers.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe planes hit the buildings. No.
Oh, you don't believe planes hit the buildings?
I don't even believe planes. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think they were holograms? Do you think they were holograms?
I think there was only about 23 of footage. There's only about 23 different filmed.
Only 23.
Yeah,
only 23.
Okay, there's less than 40. There's less than 40 videos of the planes going in. I believe every single one of them was edited. Yes, for a fact.
What was it that hit the towers?
It was pre-planted explosives through the Israeli army.
No. But what are the things that looked like planes?
Bombs. Oh no, that's just a hologram. There's a lot of people.
Oh, okay. So you do believe that holograms? Okay.
No, not holograms. Not holograms.
You just said it. You just said holograms.
The people thought they saw holograms. They did not see anything. There's nobody on the ground that saw the planes hit the tower. I watched a video from NYU students. They watched the whole film, the whole thing. No plane.
Well, then what did people actually see on the ground? You're saying
like Transformers, CGI. Yeah, it was edited in, just like you watch a movie.
This resulted in a bill being proposed, of course, that would prevent children from attending any drag show, regardless if they happen to be storytime hour or they happen to be inside of a nightclub. What's worse is that what was happening outside the nightclub I consider to be way more damaging towards children.
I wonder if the mama bear instinct is going to come out in 3 years when the mainstream Democrat Party platform is they want to rape your kids. And they're all going to think it's one big, smug little joke, these people, by the way. Understand that there is a bigger difference between 10 years ago and now than there would be between now and in 5 years when they're openly advocating for pedophilia like they've already started doing. You people are the symptom of a dying society, and you know it. You're scaring children!
Grown adults were screaming that their parents were pedophiles and groomers and repeatedly telling them that they were a danger to kids, screaming at them. This has happened at numerous events, including drag queen story hours, where children were just being read stories, and in bursts a whole bunch of Proud Boys, the 3%ers, or other white militiamen with shirts that say "kill your local pedophile" on them. If you listen to the sounds inside, the children sound terrified.
How about you guys? This is disgusting.
So I don't know how else to explain the fact that if you have kids being read stories and a bunch of grown men burst in there screaming about how their parents are pedophiles, that's not traumatizing to kids. That they're not going to remember that forever. That they're not going to have this memory of all these adults scaring the hell out of them and calling their parents the worst things in the world. And the really messed up thing about this is these tactics have been used before. And I'm not just talking about in the 80s during the gay panic where they always tried to associate gay men with pedophilia, or before that in the 70s with more panic where they tried to associate gay men with pedophilia, or the 60s or the 50s.
That's terrible. Like, what is that, post-surrealism? He's like, no, this is real, it's happening. No, it becomes this, look, I dress like this just in drag.
Well, Hitler was in part a response to this kind of culture developing in Germany.
Now, let's be clear. Of course, no one is defending Hitler.
You see, it was the Nazis that specifically began to target and vilify LGBTQ people as part of their program. Up until that point, the largest gender research facility, hospital, and or educational facility that had ever existed was targeted specifically by the Nazis and burnt to the ground. They saw trans people and queer people in general as degenerates who needed to be purged from society.
The Institute didn't have a happy ending. Being a gay, Jewish, sexual liberation activist during the rise of the Nazis, Hirschfeld was a target. Hitler himself described Hirschfeld as the most dangerous Jew in Germany. So tragically, on May the 6th, 1933, Nazi demonstrators raided the libraries of the Institute of Sexology. More than 20,000 books were taken from the shelves and burned in the streets by Nazi youth groups. Thousands of irreplaceable photographs, artifacts, and medical records were lost, destroyed. Decades of work gone in an instant. Some sources say a sculpture of Hirschfeld was taken during the raid, skewered, carried on a stick, and then burned in the bonfire. Many of the Institute's residents were killed during the attacks, and those who survived were sent to concentration camps.
No one is defending Hitler or...
Hans, are we the baddies?
You'll have Tucker Carlson opening his segments like this.
Just another weekend in Weimar.
Both implying that it is the current degeneracy that is going to lead us into fascism. That, oh no, if you don't watch out, we'll become Nazis. I should also stipulate that it's kind of weird considering all these people also seem to have the yikesiest takes possible on these subjects.
What is the age of consent? What should it be in your mind? Go on record.
I support whatever law is in place in your current residence. You know,
it's a cop-out, isn't it?
Let's get a real case. Asia Argento, right? Asia Argento. You guys, Bearing, you familiar with this? She, allegedly groomed a 14-year-old boy and then fucked him when he was 17. Now,
how old she?
She was like almost 40 at that point.
Oh, fuck.
Well, she had also worked with him when he was like an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old boy in some Hollywood set.
Why are we focused on that?
Well, no, I'm just trying to take a long. It's a really long example of how I feel. Well, it's hard to say like every 17-year-old boy is created equal, right? But I'm saying like Asia Argento was in her 40s. She fucked a 17-year-old, and the age of consent in California is 18. So she technically broke the law. Do I view her as a fucking disgusting child predator? No, I don't. That will,
no, but in all seriousness, though, if she groomed him from the time he was 14, I think it is a pretty disgusting crime. If she was 40, I can understand if she was 19 and he was 17. I mean, that happens. But 40 and she's groomed him since 14. No, that's fucked.
But isn't that fucked up, right? Like if I'm 16 and let's say a 24-year-old woman, you know, I'm at some like a music festival and some 24-year-old fucks me, it's really hard for me to view that as like a predatory situation. I'm like, it's in the Asa Argento situation, she absolutely knew how old he was. And then like, I mean,
I wasn't talking about. I was talking about your example scenario of a 24-year-old chick fucking 16. If she knew that guy was 16, yeah, that's fucked. She's committed a crime.
But if you're 16 and you get that pussy, do you feel like a victim?
A mature, established 35-year-old man cannot have a healthy, productive, fruitful relationship with a woman 10 years younger than him.
I didn't say that. I just think...
You just said they were immature and they shouldn't be matched up.
22.
Okay, 22, 23, 24.
Look,
women mature way more.
To go to college.
Women mature way more quickly than men, dude.
That's
way more quickly.
It's preference.
At age 15, they're basically women already, right? And it's like men hit their prime in their 30s.
35.
Why wouldn't a man in his prime latch on to a woman in her prime? Why not? That seems the most logical thing possible.
That's what's happened for millennia.
Millennia.
Older men would marry like 15-year-olds.
Let's take the family dynamic out of it for a second, just for a moment, because I don't want to dwell on that. It's too disturbing. And let's pretend that we're talking about just some dude and a girl, and they're not related. Even in that context, the idea that verbal consent should precede every physical interaction is asinine. As a little kid, if I was like 6 years old, and my grandmother came to visit and said, "Hey, give me a hug," and I said, "Nah, I don't feel like it, Granny," I cannot imagine what my dad's reaction would have been. It would not have been pleasant, I can tell you. My reaction with my own kids wouldn't be pleasant in that situation. Yes, I tell them. I guess let me tell you something. I violate my kids' consent all the time in the sense that I force them to do things they don't want to do.
Sit down and study!
But my favorite one by far happens to be James Lindsay, because James Lindsay for a while was going back and forth with me on Twitter and would often respond to my criticism of him with the catchphrase. Turns out James Lindsay decided to go to a certain event with a member of the NXIVM cult.
There's a secret organization in NXIVM. They sign a lifetime vow of obedience, and they're branding girls.
And they're trying to recruit other women to do this.
I'm so strong. Like, you'd never be able to do what I just did.
I always want to earn my authority.
Yes, that NXIVM cult, and not just a random member, but one of the inner fucking circle.
What's happening is communism. Communism has known for over 100 years that you sexualize the children if you want to get a revolution. But of course, you render the children useless after the revolution, so you have to do away with them after they've been used for their purposes.
Now call me a pearl-clutching, virtue-signaling lefty drunk on soy. Oh, sweet soy! But I think it's pretty bad if you're associating with an ex-cult member who is part of an organization whose leader has now been jailed for both trafficking and pedophilia.
But hey, that's just a theory.
A game theory. Libs of TikTok and Matt Walsh have become emboldened by their success. They launched simultaneous campaigns that were echoed by others like Christopher Rufo, Andy No, and
Tucker Carlson tonight.
The target? Children's hospitals. First, with Boston's Children's Hospital. Once again, they chose a lie to enrage their fan bases by saying it was performing hysterectomies on children under the age of 18, which numerous sources, including the hospital itself, confirmed wasn't true. This didn't stop both Matt and Haya from posting nonstop about the issue until it led to doctors and nurses directly getting death threats.
They kind of went further down the rabbit hole. But I think what's also really important, we talk about the influence of social media and these folks becoming radicalized, but we really don't talk about the factors that really get them to this point.
The hospital became so inundated with calls to violence that it started to disrupt regular healthcare. At this point, we're talking about the endangerment of children's lives who receive critical care at the facilities. Seeing the success of these campaigns, they turned their sights on other children's hospitals, including Children's National Hospital, which had to also issue a statement that it did not and had not ever performed bottom surgery on children. Despite numerous newspapers and journalists calling them out, they would eventually release their smoking gun.
Libs of TikTok doing some investigative journalism. One of the only people in the country doing actual investigative journalism. And
a secret recording Haya had done that had doctors actually confessing to performing hysterectomies on kids. Except, it wasn't. Instead, it was Libs of TikTok calling into a hospital receptionist who tried to pass her off to another department to book an appointment and get more information. Both calls were to a receptionist, and you can clearly hear them trying to transfer them, as is their job, to the proper department.
Transition to male. He already had the top surgery, and now we're looking for the hysterectomy.
Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to transfer you to the GYN nurse line. One of the nurses will give you a call to give you more information and to let you know the steps and the protocol that they do for that, okay?
They weren't nurses. They weren't doctors. They were not the medical professionals who perform or consult patients about hysterectomies. But it didn't matter. That was enough.
Authorities said they responded to Boston Children's Hospital on Tuesday night over a bomb threat.
Soon, Boston's Children's Hospital received an actual bomb threat. At this point, one would think disrupting the healthcare of children to such a degree based on a lie would have been enough to have them stop. But instead, they doubled down and actually demanded an apology from their critics. As you've probably guessed by now, neither of them care about the welfare of children. If they did, they wouldn't have put their lives in jeopardy, let alone try to insert themselves into a conversation involving doctors and their genitals. Aya Rychek blocked us on Twitter when we pointed out how horrifying it was that she uploaded and posted a video someone had taken inside a children's bathroom where a child can be seen using a closed stall. As for Matt Walsh, he both released and profited off of a movie that had featured a topless 15-year-old boy, which he believes to be a girl, aka Matt Walsh makes money off topless children's pictures. It gets even worse when you see and read his defense of Josh Duggar, the reality TV star who sexually molested multiple young girls, including one as young as 5. He would go on to be arrested for child pornography later in life, but the article of Matt doing apologia for him is still up to this day. This has nothing to do with protecting kids from the G word. If it did, they'd actually be honest about it. They talk about how the majority of assaults towards kids are done by close relatives or friends. They talk about how disgusting it is that a majority of US states allow for child bride, and that hundreds of thousands of kids have been married to adults. They'd learn that trans people are more often the victims of sexual assault than the perpetrators, and the overwhelming offenders are straight cis men. But this has never been about the kids. This has and always will be an excuse to try and vilify gay and trans people and weaponize hatred against them. Doesn't even matter if they endanger cis kids along the way, because they're just going to be acceptable sacrifices in their war against the LGBTQ. Twitter sits back and barely polices it, while the entire right-wing ecosystem screams that they're being censored because they're not allowed to tweet out every day that regular people are mutilated freaks.
And then something surprising happened. The US midterms, historically a changing of the guard of the two branches of government and a rebuke of the unpopular, poorly polling president. But not this time. What was supposed to be a red wave was nothing more than a red puddle of Reagan's piss. The Senate at the time of writing staying in control of the Democrats with the potential to gain a seat due to a runoff election. The House of the elephant that was supposed to gain nearly 40 to 50 seats is still struggling to piss out more than a couple. When polled and interviewed, it turned out that Americans don't find trans people that scary. In fact, they're largely not concerned about them at all.
They're not that hopped up on anger about trans people living their lives. And also the cruelty of this to people who are, these people are systematically targeted. They're bullied in school. They are kids.
Culture war issues that came to define the party had way less sway over the population. Things like having your bodily autonomy taken away. Things like healthcare. Things like legalizing marijuana. Things like protection for LGBTQ plus people, because it turns out Americans, for all the shit I give their pundits, are nothing like them. There's just a small handful of really, really loud assholes that make it seem like they have more power than they do. And see, that's the thing. As long as everyone joins together, regardless of their gender, or sexuality, or identity, or skin color, or ethnicity, or religion, or goddamn country, because guess what, world? We all use the internet together. Then the most they'll ever have is counting down the remaining days before no one buys their lies anymore.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but it's, if we're talking about the drugs, it's, millions.
You're talking about hormone blockers.
Yeah.
Millions of kids have been on hormone blockers, really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on that, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess. I can say for double mastectomies, I read a report recently that there were over 1,000 done between 2016 and 2019, and when you compare that to how many were done between 2008 and 2015, it's a massive increase. And over 1,000 girls had gender affirming double mastectomies in that time frame.
And when you say girls, you're talking about prepubescent,
right? Minors, and that's just up until 2019. And then we know that there's been this exponential increase with all this stuff year over year. So it's a lot. It's too many. Having this happen to one kid is way too many. It's a lot more than one.
Yeah, look, if you're an adult and you want to do that and you understand who you are and what you are and this is how you feel you should progress, you're an adult. This is a free country. You should be able to do whatever you want. But when you're talking about doing that to children, the fact that so many people are on board and so many people are angry, if you have, people are going to be angry at us that we're having these conversations.
Yeah, they will be. And I also... I actually think that this shouldn't be happening to.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
This says it's kind of undercounted, but that
would be a big undercounting.
Less than 1,000 people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
Million sounds great.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
The Media Matters will have fun with that clip.
Yeah.
Wanted to see the other side, a reality where they don't need to hide. While the stress and tension spinning in my mind, I'm more than just I am just a vibe. Wanted to see the other side of reality where they don't need to hide. While there's stress and tension spinning in my mind, I'm more than just I am just a vibe. Yo, this unicorn was tired of their uniform. Facts. True to form, shed his skin and now a new one's born. Yes. Broke the news to mom, she called the meeting with the fam. Not a word was said, slapped him with his meanest hand. Cold chill.